Well, hello and welcome. I'm Steve Barg, City Administrator for the City of Marshfield, and this is the post-council news conference for the meeting on Tuesday, October 12th. We actually had two meetings that evening, a special budget meeting at 5 p.m., and then the regular council meeting was moved back an hour. Because of that meeting, it was bumped back to 7 p.m. Quite a bit on the docket on both meetings to talk about, and I'm here today with Mike Warren, representing Hub City Times. Mike, take it away.
All right, thanks, Steve. Yeah, it was a busy night from 5 until, gosh, I don't know, 10 o'clock?
Yeah, a little later.
A little later than that.
A little later than 10.
And so the budget meeting at 5 p.m. on the 6th was just a chance to, was this the first, I think the first of several meetings to just kind of start building the city budget for next year? Maybe give us a recap of what that meeting was about.
Yeah, it was the first of what are scheduled to be 4 meetings running from the second week in October through the first day of November, kind of one per week. Now, last year we needed 4 meetings. We've had years when we've only needed 3 or even 2, so we'll see how complicated it gets and what kind of concerns are raised along the way. But the premise of the first meeting, Mike, is that we had a kind of laid on the foundation by Ron Allman, our finance director. He kind of planted the seeds as to some of the things you need to be thinking about, where we stand financially. And then I did my annual budget presentation, probably took about, 12 to 15 minutes, somewhere in there, where I looked at some of the basics with how do we stand with our TIF districts, debt management, reserve funds, property tax rates compared to our neighboring communities, those types of things. And then I launched into a little summary of the staff's proposed 2022 budget. And then we had every category that we go through: general government, public safety, public works, economic development. We took each one separately and walked through it. And I explained to the council, what are the differences over last year? I mean, there's no sense talking about a budget at great length if, the Parks Department went up 0.1%. They can flag it. They can certainly look at they've got the budget in front of them. They can still raise questions. But I tried to hit the highlights of things that are up or down, noteworthy ways, and then why. What's causing the change from 2021? And they had some Q&A. The meeting took about an hour and 45 minutes. We cut off, I think, just before 6:45. We still have to go through the special funds, room tax, the communications budget, debt management, particularly internal service funds, wastewater, those kind of things. And that'll happen at the second meeting on October 18th, this coming Monday. But I did present a budget that has a 2.5% tax rate increase. I didn't get any initial response from council as to that. I'm sure that they might have been hoping, at least some of them hoping, that after last year's increase that we could maybe get a little lower than 2.5. But the inflation rate right now is 5.3%. All of our costs are going up. We have union contracts that are going up. We have the cost of supplies and equipment are going up, like a lot of people are seeing when they go to the grocery store and the gas station and those kind of places with the rate of inflation. And at 2.5%, really, I think it reflects the cost of doing business. It would take our tax rate from $10.25 per thousand to $10.51. I did report that our neighboring communities, Point and Rapids, Stevens Point is just slightly below us now, and they're looking at a 3% increase, which would bring them to 1046. And Wisconsin Rapids is 1157, I think, something like that. So we're comparable, if not favorable, with our neighboring cities. Not that we always use them for comparison, but I think it's a reasonable proposal. I think the council will probably have questions and concerns in the next couple of meetings on ways that they'd like to see us look at explaining or possibly addressing some things that they're concerned about, and we'll see where it goes.
All right, so when people hear 2.5% increase, 1025 to 1051, again, that's a proposed budget. That's nothing that is set in stone just yet, and these are preliminary, I guess, budget discussions that will continue in the weeks ahead here?
Yeah, that is correct, Mike. And the council may want to add some things that aren't there and cut some things that they don't think we should have in the budget. They may have a tax rate target that's different than 2.5. Maybe their target is 2.0 or something. I don't know. We haven't really gotten that far yet. But I feel good about our proposal. I spent a lot of time in September and the first week of October wrapping this up with Ron Allman and others, trying to frame it. It's really hard because with inflation, with costs that we don't control, state aids are pretty flat. I'm not complaining about Madison, but we don't see a lot of increase in shared revenue and some of those highway aids. So it really does become challenging to hold to that, to that 2.5% mark. And I feel good about what we presented, but we'll see what they want to do in the next couple of meetings.
All right, anything else about that meeting?
No, except to encourage people to give their input. I think I say this almost every time you and I are together, Mike, and we've had these conversations over the years. Input with email, phone calls, come to the podium at the next meeting. You'd be surprised how valuable that input is and how much council takes it to heart. So if you have a thought about wanting to see us do more, maybe the park in your neighborhood needs an upgrade in your opinion, you'd like to see new equipment, street improvements, or on the other hand, maybe you just want to say, look, can you hold the taxes tighter? I'm on a fixed income. Whatever your thoughts are, please find a way to share them with us over the next couple of weeks.
All right, then as far as the regular council meeting after that budget meeting, well, speaking of feedback, that meeting did start off with a fair amount of about a half hour's worth of feedback during the public comment portion of the meeting.
It did, and the lion's share of that was related to the clinic, which I'm sure we'll be talking about in this conversation. The clinic, as part of what they've been dealing with the council, really is looking for approval to construct a skywalk from the east wing to the hospital building. That would be across Oak Avenue. The council did vote against that back on September 21st in a very close vote. And they really just came to the podium to say, look, we've got some plans, we've got some ideas. We want to make the campus better. We want to improve the old hospital. We want to upgrade the campus in general and make it, an even more quality medical facility, but looking for our help and our support. And I think you know that behind the Skywalk project, there's also the issue of their request for a tax exemption on 2 parcels. And that right now is headed down the litigation road, but that could change. So I think they just wanted to plant the seed in our minds as city officials that they want to move forward. They got great plans and they want to support. We did have a couple of people who came to the podium and spoke as individuals, saying either that they felt that way or that they felt that the request for tax exemption was not warranted and that they shouldn't be granted to get off the tax rolls for those 2 parcels. So it's really, truly public input the way it's supposed to be at the public comment period. We did have 2 other people who brought up other concerns related to road conditions, and those are being followed up on now by our Public Works Department.
All right. Well, and as long as we're on that subject, maybe we could jump ahead to basically the end of the meeting where the council, did come out of a closed session and did take some action on the Skywalk issue?
They did. Really, the heart of the Skywalk issue, there have been a lot of little things, involved too, but the heart of it in a lot of the conversations has been, since we appear to be headed toward litigation in the tax case, there's been this thought that if the clinic is able to get approval to extend a skywalk from the east wing to the hospital, that would bolster their case, that really they are, in effect, a hospital use. And that the court might look at it and say, look, you got a skywalk that runs from the 2 buildings, and that might help their case and hurt the city. So the council has been hesitant to want to allow something that might ultimately be detrimental to our argument. So there's been a lot of talk about trying to frame it so that doesn't happen. And what you're looking at is, I put on your table the amended portion of section 17 that talks about the effect of the lease. Attorneys on both sides have been working to frame this. You see in the earlier sentences in that section, some commentary trying to do that. But the council ultimately added one more sentence that's in yellow highlighted that basically even tries to further frame the notion that it cannot be used in court. That if the clinic were to come to court for the tax claim, if we get that far and say, look, Your Honor, obviously we're a hospital use. Look, we're connected between the 2 buildings. People are shuttling every day across this walkway. This effectively says, no, you're not supposed to do that. That's not, you're not allowed to do that. At this point, the city has extended this back to them as an offer. We did come out in open session and approve the amended lease with this language. Clinic officials are looking at it right now. I'm sure they're running it by their legal, caught them off guard perhaps a little bit. And I'm expecting to hear back from them soon if they find this to be acceptable, which would allow them to then sign on the dotted line with the city and begin moving forward to finish the construction of that skywalk.
All right, so that was just the council's approval, and now the clinic would have to sign off on it. Then it wouldn't have to come back to council?
Correct. If that's the case, if they sign on it as is, that wouldn't come back to council. If they say, well, we like this, but could we modify that wording a little bit, then it would have to come back to the council. I want to say one more thing too. People probably wonder why we go into closed session as often as we do. And they might be thinking, well, if you wanted to add one sentence, why didn't you just do it in open session? Why didn't you just come out and say we want to tighten this up a little bit? Well, you go into closed session to talk to your legal counsel, and you have these conversations that need to be in closed session where you talk about, well, what are the ramifications if the wording is like this? How could it affect us in court someday if the wording is like that? So we did have a good discussion in closed session, and adding this particular sentence is what came out of it.
Okay. Anything else out of closed session?
No, there were two other, well, actually, there's a development being proposed behind Walmart. It's not a large development as far as, geographic size, but by a gentleman by the name of Mr. Swiderski. And the plan was to really make more progress on that by the end of 2021. For a variety of reasons, that hasn't happened. He was asking for an extension of 2 years until the end of 2023 to meet his obligations under the agreement, and the council said that was fine. We're trying to get more housing, as we're trying to get more housing everywhere. And because of the extenuating circumstances, they felt that was reasonable. That was the other item that came out of closed session.
All right. Well, as long as we're at the end of the meeting, maybe we'll just work backwards here from there, because the other big highlight, for me anyway, maybe one of the headlines that came out of this meeting was another discussion regarding, I'll just read it off the agenda, possible change to prohibiting weapons in City Hall. You kind of presented an update on this, I guess, after it was basically rejected 2 years ago. And then it was Alderman Fisher, I believe, who asked to have this put back on the agenda again. Maybe a summary of what the ask was there, and what the outcome was after another round of discussion at the October 12th meeting.
I'd be glad to, Mike. Before I do that, I just want to make one more comment on the clinic topic, and that's just to remind people again. I know that there's been some conversation in the public about whether the city and the clinic are fighting. We're not fighting. There are good conversations going on the side, people trying to come up with ideas for resolution, and we're not at war with them. We're very proud of the work that they do, and that they're part of our community, a big part of our community. We'll let you know if there's anything more to report as we go along, but I just want to clarify that for people who might be tuned in here. Regarding the no weapons in City Hall, yeah, back in the fall of 2019, this was voted upon, and it failed by a 5-4 vote to remove the signs. If you ever come to City Hall, you've seen the signs on the door that say no weapons. It doesn't say no firearms, it says no weapons of any kind are permitted in the building. Well, as you said, Mr. Fisher heard from a constituent saying, look, can't you bring this back? Concealed carry is very popular across Wisconsin. People, are able to have handguns, in various places if they meet the legal requirements. So it was brought up. I did some investigation on it the last month or so. I talked to 9 cities around us, and only one of them, I believe it's, I want to say Weston, allows the carrying of weapons in City Hall, and they have some restrictions on how it plays out. But the others all do not allow it. The arguments on both sides are so obvious. I think we've talked about these before. On one side, it's, is it not a safer place to be for employees and citizens if you don't allow weapons? Do you really want people walking around with guns and knives or whatever? On the other side, it's an obvious thought that bad guys don't read signs. So if someone's coming in, and I'm going to take out Steve Barg and Deb Hall and others today, oh, rats, there's a sign. I have to leave my gun in the car. It's probably not going to happen either. So it kind of mirrored the debate that you hear on cable TV if you watch cable TV news, where two well-meaning people just see life differently. They talked about it at great lengths, and they voted not a lot differently than last time. This time was 5-5. Everybody was there this time. But guess what? As you and I talked before the program, we don't have a mayor right now to break that tie. And 5-5 without a mayor breaking the tie in the affirmative fails for lack of a majority. So again, this one kind of slides by the wayside, and I'm hoping that it doesn't get brought back anytime soon again. Not because I have dislike of talking about the topic, but you probably don't want to bring it back real often, but I wouldn't be surprised if the public or somebody wants to talk about it again, and I guess that can never be ruled out. But for right now, it was a 5-5 vote, and it's not happening.
Well, and speaking of tie votes, then wasn't there an issue right after that where they tried to make an appointment to the Fire and Police Commission? And I think that was a tie vote.
It was. Mary Bessler had been put forward by Nick Paschal at the previous meeting to replace Gordy Earl, who stepped off of the Fire and Police Commission. And if you remember back in the meeting before, there had been some concern raised by a couple of council members about why we weren't getting to see all the candidates. They had said, well, why don't we get to see everybody come to the podium and talk about why they'd be good and their background and experience. And we ran this by the city attorney and said, do we need to do that? Should we do that? In our code, Mike, the only time it says that we treat an appointment like that is for the Utilities Commission. And that's because, it's like I said, it's called out in code. That's a council election. So we had candidates for the utilities opening the other day, and we had the council voting on little paper ballots, giving them to the city clerk, and it turned out to be whatever the vote was, and Mike Ebro was reappointed. But for this, it's like the appointments we do in April with all the different committees. It's simply the council president or the mayor brings it forward, and the council says thumbs up or thumbs down. If they say thumbs up, the person's appointed. If they say thumbs down, then it's up to the, in this case, council president to bring forward another person. And Nick did receive 8 applications, so to speak. He received emails from 8 parties asking to be considered for this opening. So there are other people interested. He felt Mary was the best candidate. That's why he brought her forward. The council members don't have to give reasons why they vote against an appointment. There may have been people who had questions about her qualifications. There may have been people who still had concerns about the way this was done. Why didn't they have more input? I really don't know. But right now, it's incumbent upon the council president to bring back another name for their consideration, and I would suspect that that's probably going to happen on October 26th.
So was it, but we don't really know what the issue was, or were they voting maybe against the fact that it was not a mayor and it was a council president making a recommendation or bringing a name, which is kind of out of the ordinary? Again, we don't know.
Mr. Wagner had brought up at the previous meeting, could the council president do this? I mean, he's not the mayor. In fact, we haven't even called him the acting mayor for the most part because, it really, besides running the meetings and signing documents, he doesn't even embrace that term himself. He's just kind of, helping keep the ship running for a while here. But that might have been, the city attorney cleared that up at the beginning of the meeting, at the beginning of that item. He said, look, I've looked into it. The council president is duly authorized to make the appointments the same way that a mayor could. And then it's up to the council to say yay or nay. So again, I'm not sure if they felt that there was a concern over whether Ms. Bessler was the best candidate or if they just felt that, they didn't like the process. But the process is going to be the same next time as it was this time. It's the council president's right to make the appointment. Their role is to either approve or disapprove. Okay,
so he'll probably, like you said, be presenting another name here next time around?
I think so. We've had the resignation of the police chief some time ago, and also on this agenda, we approved a contract with McGrath to have them, spearhead the recruitment for a new police chief. And so, we really want to get somebody appointed to that commission as soon as we can. And I think you'll see him bring another name forward on the 26th.
Okay. Yeah, and I was going to ask about that as long as we're on that. It says request to authorize execution of an agreement for professional services related to police chief recruitment process. Basically, that's what a company or a firm helps you find candidates that would be suitable for the job. Maybe just take us through that agenda item.
Yeah, when I was selected to be the administrator 10 years ago, they used a search firm, a professional services firm, if you will, to help with the selection process. The real thing is, if you're just simply looking at internal candidates, you're not going to hire somebody and pay them a lot of money to do that. But if you're trying to do an internal and an external search, these firms, they have contacts, they know who might be out there looking, and they have experience in terms of leading those kind of recruitments. So ultimately, after talking about whether to use an external firm or not, the Fire and Police Commission said, yes, let's get one involved. They got 4 proposals, from qualified firms, and ultimately they selected McGrath. McGrath is out of Northern Illinois. They're the same people who did our compensation study 4 years ago. They have skills, and they'll be leading the charge now. I think the base fee for them is $25,000. There are ancillary costs that might have to be paid for extras along the way that aren't part of the contract. But they'll really take the lead. Jennifer Raiku, our HR director, will be helping them and working with them on our end. But, with the hope that during the next few months, we will go through a thoughtful process to hire a new police chief for the city of Marshfield.
So timeline on that is what?
Well, I think when asked the other night, I think that Jennifer said maybe 4 to 6 months. Hopefully it'll be on the lower side of that. We're all anxious to get a new leader of our law enforcement department. Although, having said that, I'm going to put in one more plug for Pat Zepps and the work he has done as acting chief, going back to August of 2020. So he's been doing the job for 14 months. But we do want to move this forward, and hopefully it'll be closer to 4 by the time this gets done.
All right. Well, and then just to add to that, so they would they would basically help you narrow down candidates and bring them to council, or where would that go? What's the process there in terms of them, once they find candidates, what are the channels that those recommendations go through?
Well, the Fire and Police Commission will be at the heart of this. Okay. And, when I was hired as city administrator 10 years ago, I think they had like 47 applicants, and including internal, as I recall, at least one internal applicant, maybe more. And then they did some preliminary screening, narrowed that field down to a more manageable number. And, eventually they got down to the top 5. And then they worked with the local staffer, which I think Laura Bear was our HR manager at the time, and set up, some thoughtful things in terms of interviews, but also meet and greets, so all the candidates could talk to other staff, and community leaders were involved. I suspect that will be the case again. We want the community to embrace the new police chief as well. So, as the process goes on, there'll be a lot of involvement on our end, logistically and otherwise, but they'll be walking it through from a large number of candidates down to the top 12, down to the top 4 or 5, and ultimately the final selection process.
Okay. Also, there was another agenda item. It looks like you're going to get some, well, let's see here. Review responses, okay, to RFQ for assessor services. Take us through this one. This is a little different than maybe the police chief recruitment process. And also, the other thing I guess I wasn't aware of is that we are, farming out our assessor services, which I didn't realize.
Yeah, let me first, as I did on an earlier item, go back to a previous item real quickly. I didn't mean to speculate how many interested people we'll have for the police chief. I used a number that, was 47 when I was trying for administrator. Yeah. We don't know how many candidates there might be who put their hat in the ring, so to speak, but I'm glad we have a firm helping us with a thoughtful process. On the assessor thing, Mike, when Joan Spencer retired back in 2017, the city looked at options about finding a new staff assessor, contracting with other firms. Most cities our size really don't have their own staff assessor anymore. They really do contract with a company. There's a lot of reasons for that, partly because there aren't enough assessors to go around, and especially for smaller communities. So we contracted with Grota out of Menominee Falls. They've been our assessing firm since the middle of 2017. They don't want to continue when their contract ends now. So rather than do requests for proposals, we did what's called an RFQ, request for qualifications. Here's the difference. Request for proposal, you spec out, here's what we want you to do. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Here's all the expectations. And then we get you to propose with a price. So, Mike Warren sends in an application that says, I'll charge this much and blah, blah, blah. Steve Barg does something different. The RFQ process is, look, let's find out people who are qualified and interested in being our assessor. And then based on that, let's look at their qualifications and what they have to offer and hone in on and say, look, based upon this firm, what they offer, their references, what kind of communities they've dealt with in the past, this looks like the best fit for us. Let's see if we can negotiate a contract with that firm, negotiate not only a price, but expectations. How often will they be here? 1 day a week, That's what GROTA does now. What are some of the requirements that we're looking for them to provide? Because from community to community, they're a little different. So I put out an RFQ last month. The deadline just passed. We got 3 firms interested in being our next assessor, and we'll be reviewing them in a meeting on this coming Monday with the staff team. At the council meeting, I shouldn't say staff team, the review team. At the council meeting on Tuesday, Mike, the council went for a group of 7 staff members and then 3 members of the council. Nick as the council president, Nick Paschal, Ed Wagner as the chair of finance, budget, and personnel, Tom Butke as the chairman of the Board of Public Works. So the 10 of us are going to look at the 3 proposals, or the 3 submissions, and say, well, this one has more of this one has more of that. Boy, these people do more small cities, and try and figure out which one of the 3 to focus on first, and then get together with them and see, can we come into some agreement that'll work for both parties? I'm confident that we can. Of the proposals I've seen, they're good firms, they're quality firms. I have no reason to believe this won't lead to a successful end.
Does RFQ, does that process then basically negate having to do the RFP process too then, in addition to that?
It does.
Okay.
It does. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. We could turn around and send out an RFP to those 3 firms. But in this case, we've identified that it's going to be more of a negotiating process than anything, as opposed to opening up sealed proposals and going that route. So we truly want to find the firm that's best for us, and then see if we can work it out. If we can't work out an agreement, we'll likely go to number 2. And I can tell you that all 3 of these are well qualified. It's not a matter of going to somebody who is a lesser product. So.
Okay. All right, and then the agenda item right after that was, garnered quite a bit of discussion too. Review proposed policy regarding remote participation in council and committee meetings. And gosh, I can't remember now if there was action on this or not, but this has been a topic that basically has come up since, well, in the wake of the pandemic. And that's when this kind of became an issue. What was that discussion like, and where did it end?
Well, again, I brought this up a while back because the city attorney flagged it. We had never, before COVID, allowed a member of the council to participate in a meeting of the council or one of their committees, finance, budget, and personnel, board of public works, nor anybody really on other committees that involve citizens if you're not physically there. And that's been the standard thing that, and people have done for years. Well, why have we done that? Well, historically, there wasn't technology to get around that. In COVID, the governor said, we'd like to see you, under his safer at home order, have your meetings remotely, or at least allow people the opportunity to participate remotely. Well, COVID is continuing. The pandemic's not over, but it's not as intense as it was back in 2020 and the early part of 2021. And so the city attorney suggested if we're going to continue to allow people to participate by Zoom, we really ought to have a policy. What are the expectations? When I went into this, Mike, I assumed we were going to have a discussion about under what conditions we would allow someone to participate remotely. Family emergency, health problem that confines you to home. Your business travel takes you out of town. You can't help it. Your employer says you have to go to Minneapolis, but can I sit in my hotel room and participate? This is an important vote. The council felt they wanted to be more lenient than that. They felt, wait a minute, this is 2021 and the technology has gotten a lot better. Why would we not allow someone to participate by Zoom if they can, if it works for them in a given circumstance? So they really just wanted to see the very basics. So I did a survey. I surveyed the same 9 groups that I did for the no firearms policy, and I found out that most of them do allow remote participation, although some of them don't have policies. They've just more informally allowed it. So what I gave to you is what I handed off to the council. I put in their packet a policy from Marathon City, one of our neighbors, really short. It's about a half a page that really says, basically, we allow you to participate remotely, provided that you meet some base expectations, and really not a lot more than that you have the proper equipment. So if you have a bad internet connection, we don't want to hear you crackling in and out, or your sound keeps going out because you're in a place that it doesn't work, or you don't have the proper technology. And they also had one that was kind of debated. We can talk about that in a minute. A clause that says no member shall participate or vote on any matter that requires visual assessment of physical evidence or exhibits that haven't been previously reviewed by that member. That one got some debate. I think that Mr. Fisher and maybe others said, wait a minute, hold on. It's the electronic age. Why can't you get it to us by technology? In fact, why can't the staff send everything in advance that we need to see so we can see it before the meeting starts? I think the thought of that Marathon City probably had when they came up with this years ago is, you go to the podium right now and you start holding up things. Look, this is what I found on my road. It's a, and whatever. And this is the problem you have over on Lincoln Avenue. And I'm at, in a hotel and I'm like, I can't see what this guy's talking about. Well, how can you vote if you can't see the evidence? But I think the council made a good point. Technology allows us to give, good photographs of it. We can send them things in advance that they can see ahead of time. We can do screen sharing for them if we need to during the meeting. Why would we not allow them to get over that hurdle? So really what I'm going to bring back to them in a couple of weeks, Mike, is even stripped down from this. You think this is small and short? This will be probably tightening it even further with the base issue being you need to have the technology in place to do it. We don't want you being a distraction to the meeting by having poor internet service or other problems of that nature.
So they did not take a vote on this policy
I think it was
on the 12th.
I have to look back and see if it was a vote or consensus, but they didn't have a policy to vote on. They just had they had a document from Marathon City. What they did, whether it was by a vote or consensus, they directed me to turn this into a policy and to bring it back to them. And I have no doubt that they'll approve it, Mike. This will not be one of those 5 to 5s. There's a strong consensus that allowing people to participate remotely is a positive.
Okay. There was one other agenda item that caught my attention, adopting new ward boundaries based upon results of the 2020 census. And this was, I believe, a resolution.
Yeah, Alderman Wagner spoke about that a little bit. He was on the committee along with a couple of his peers, council members. Spiros and Fisher were on that team as well. And they took the census data. David Bueller, our GIS coordinator, Deb Hall helped as well, spread out these maps and said, look, here's what's happened over the last 10 years according to the census. Some people have moved more from this part of town to that part of town. And so the team had to work on this, and they did a good job. They had to make a little minor shiftings of the ward and district boundary lines. Again, if you haven't heard this and you're listening to me right now, for the council districts, we have a population of just under 20,000, and every district needs to have roughly the same number of people. You can't have Ed Wagner representing District 5, and he's got 2,500 constituents, and Quentin Rosenditch has 1,500. That's not right. So where they found some, shifting, they had to come up with a way to say, look, we need to maybe we move the boundary line one street to the east. What would that do for us? Well, yeah, that would take another 250 people. Yeah, that would work. They didn't have crayons out, but it was that kind of thing where you had to try and, every time you move something, maybe we're creating a new problem. Now we solved the problem between districts 4 and 5, but oh my gosh, now we've created a problem with District 3. But they've come up with new maps. They took what the county gave us and worked it out. And the council blessed it the other night. Now we'll have to put that into ordinance form and codify it for the next 10 years. I will tell you, if certain people that are hearing us right now, a few people will get notice of the fact that they might even be, I think, voting in a different place. But the number is pretty small. The shifting wasn't overwhelmingly great. But now we're going to be compliant with the state law.
I think Alderman Wagner, who is good at coming up with these isms, he said it's like squeezing a balloon, You squeeze it on this side and it kind of bulges out a little bit over here, and that's kind of what it was like.
It kind of was. I come up with analogies that aren't very good. That might have been as good as anything. But, sometimes I think if you're in a group of people and you're talking about what to do, and Mike Warren has an idea, so we can help you. And by doing what you're doing, then the guy over here is going to say, well, that causes me a problem. Yeah. That's kind of what it's like when you start moving the lines around. You don't realize that you might have solved one problem but created a new one. And they met twice for a total of probably, 4 or 5 hours to work this out. So even though the number of people shifting from one ward to another isn't great, there was a lot of thought that went into it.
Okay. Also, there were 6 agenda items relating to various insurance type matters. These are sort of, or I guess, not just insurance, but I guess employee benefit type issues that always seem to be sort of annual end-of-year occurrences for the council to deal with, is that right?
Yeah, most of them are fairly housekeeping in the sense that they're not changing a lot. And again, this is where our HR director, Jennifer, was up front. And we had John Price here from M3. We use him as an insurance consultant. The major one is health insurance, because that's where the real dollars are. And Mike, we've had some real bad increases over time, the 10 years I've been here, that have really hurt us from a budgetary standpoint. And it's been warranted because our utilization has been high. And, you know, sometimes the employees kind of wonder why our premiums are going up. And we always say, look, if you're a company and we're giving you $1 of premium, and for every dollar of premium we give you, you pay out $1.20 in claims, what kind of customer do we look like? Who would do that? So that's why your rates go up. But in the last couple of years, we've been a better consumer. Our use of healthcare has dropped a lot. We look like a better customer, and as a result, our rates have dropped a little bit. So we're working with Security Health Plans. Sometimes we go out for bid, but this year we're working with them. And they had a rate that we really were able to work with them to get lowered a little bit, and it now stands at 3%. So it's a 3% increase that the council will pay, and the employees pay 15% of the premiums, and the city pays the other 85%. But a 3% increase is kind of inflationary. I don't think the world thinks much of that. When you start getting them double digits, it's a killer for our finances. So we're signing on for another year at 3%. I think when you get into 2022 budget, Mike, when we're talking in 12 months, if we have this conversation, I think you may well see the city bidding out its services. There are other healthcare providers out there. And if we have another good year, we will be a good-looking customer. We have 3 years of low claims. But security has been really good to work with here in Marshfield, and we feel that the 3% rate is something that both sides apparently can live with. Yeah. The other ones, you know, disability and dental and those kind of things, there really wasn't a lot of change. The rates are pretty flat, and but they are things we need to approve annual contracts for, and they were all passed by the council. Okay.
And I don't think people realize too, I mean, you guys, we often say that this, you know, the city doesn't, I mean, their business is people. That's where your major cost is. And when you talk about something like, you know, salaries and benefits, that is the lion's share of the annual budget, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so just when you're talking health insurance, what is that dollar figure, do you know?
$3 million, just barely over $3 million.
Just over $3 million a year.
Yeah.
Just to provide health insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a major. It is. It's a major issue.
You know, Ron Ullman, I think our finance director talked about this at the podium at our first budget meeting, and he says it a lot, and rightfully so. Our personnel costs, our you know, wages and benefits is, you know, 60% or more of our budget. And when I talk to people who work in the private sector and I say that, they say, oh, what's wrong? You can't have personal costs that are 60% or more. Well, they make products. They have industrial processes. We don't do that. I mean, our business is literally the people. And so the personnel costs are a greater percentage of our budget than they would be if you make widgets, for example.
Yeah, the only thing the city makes is trouble for people, right? I'm just kidding.
Okay, we'll cut right there. No,
I'm kidding. Yeah.
But
take two, right?
Yeah,
no,
take two.
It is. You make a good point. There's no physical product, so.
It's the building inspector who comes out to your home. It's the police officer who responds to the call. That's what it is, as opposed to a company that manufactures a product. Right. And when you manufacture a product, yeah, your personnel cost might be a lot lower as a percentage of your business.
So that went forward, and that got approved?
Yep, all the insurance contracts were approved. They're settled. We can sign now. The city will begin its open enrollment for employees very soon, and that will move forward. That went really well this year, actually.
Okay. I didn't have anything else to ask about specifically. Were there any other highlights from the meeting?
I don't think so. I think you covered all the main topics from the two meetings. I think I would just remind people that we talked about the next council meeting, being in 2 weeks, but we do have weekly budget meetings until they decide that they've hit the point where they've got it ready to go and bring to the public hearing in late November. So don't wait. If you're hearing me right now and you've got ideas or concerns or questions about how we tax and spend, please weigh in soon. We need to get that in the hopper, so to speak. But otherwise, I think that
and the next one, just to mention, it was October, 18th?
18th, Monday the 18th at 6 p.m. And then the next one will be on Tuesday the 26th at 5 p.m. prior to the regular council meeting. So this is kind of the season where budget really becomes the central focus for a month or so at the council level. And again, we don't know how many meetings there'll be, but I know they'll have questions, and we'll work at it till we get a budget that they feel good bringing to the public.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you as always, and I appreciate all of you tuning in. This concludes the post-council meeting news conference for the meetings, plural this time, of Tuesday, October 12th. On behalf of Mike Warren, representing Hub City Times, I'm Steve Barg, City Administrator. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great day.